Hello, this is Laura Robinson from the Chattanooga Area Food Bank, and I'm going to walk you through the process of determining what to plant outside when. So there are a lot of factors, and I can't go through the specifics of all of them, but basically, it depends on the weather, it depends on what's in the garden currently that is growing, plant availability, all sorts of things. But I just want to kind of walk you through in general how to think about what gets planted at what time. So basically the garden is planted for spring, summer, and fall. In general, the things that are planted in fall winter over until the spring. So just to give you a little idea, right now it is mid-October, and I planted things that are in the garden currently, which in the fall and spring are a lot of greens and root vegetables. So a lot of things were planted between, I would say, starting kind of mid to late August through September and maybe even early October. So the planting times do kind of span a month or more as certain things are being pulled out of the bed and finished harvesting, then you can plant something new. So just in general, there is a sheet that I keep in the greenhouse that will show you, and this is a UT specific planting guide. You can find all sorts of different guides online that will tell you kind of when to plant things, but you can see here if you wanted to plant beets, for example, they recommend in spring planting it between March and April, and if you want to plant it in the fall, between September and October 1st. And then this will kind of tell you how to plant it, the depth, and that kind of information. So this is, you can find tons of these kinds of lists online. I also keep track of my own lists. So this is an example of things that I get ready to plant out in the spring. And my goal is to have these lists available for each season. But as you can see, I list out the plant. I list whether I start it indoors. So obviously, because there's a greenhouse here, we can get a jump start on things. I list whether it needs to be planted or the seeds need to be started on a heat mat. So that's usually I use that for like peppers and tomatoes. But then I write down the sowing date. So if it is started indoors, like lettuce, start indoors, yes, start it on January 1st. And then I go through, and if I have the information, the ideal germination temperature. And then I put notes like when it's ready to transplant outside. And then what I like to do is go through and kind of organize what is going to go, like how many beds of each item I want. There are 23 4x8 beds, and then there are lots of containers. There's a couple of stand-up beds. So I just like to get a kind of good idea of how much I need to start based on how many beds I'm going to fill. So hopefully I'll have one of these for each season to give you a good guide. But then also in this 3-ring binder that is sitting by the scale, there is a historical reference of what gets planted in each bed, and I try to write down the dates that I'm planting things. So you can see this one at the top says fall 2023. And then I go around and I say, like in bed 18, I planted lettuce on September 21st. The garlic actually just got planted last week, so I need to write in the date for the garlic. I'm looking for a pencil right now. Some things are planted, like the mustard. That was probably the earliest thing I planted, and that's really only because there was some summer crop that, forget what was in that bed. Actually, I can tell you what was in that bed. Bed 20, it was Mexican sour gherkins, and they had stopped producing. So Kind of that end of summer time period, you can either decide to plant. I could have tried to plant more summer crops, because I probably could have, gotten bush beans or something else in there. But then you have to also consider, well, I need time to get my fall crops going, to give them a good start before it starts to get cold, which is mid-October for us. So I just decided to plant mustard in early August, and it's still out in the bed and hopefully will winter over. So, and then you can look back and see, so for example, if I flip back, I have one for spring, one for summer. If I look back to last fall, you can kind of see all the different things that are planted and in what beds. So the only other thing you really need to consider is trying to rotate crops. So for example, cole crops, which are broccoli, kale, collards, mustard, anything in that family, I try to rotate the crops where those crops are planted. So let me go back and show you in spring. And it's not always the easiest thing to figure out, but I do try to. So like, for example, if I look back to spring, I had bok choy and winter choy and mizuna planted, and those are related to broccoli, and they're in the cole crop family. So then in the fall, I planted garlic in that bed. I didn't plant more cole crops in that bed. Like I said, it's usually you can kind of figure out different things to plant in different beds. Sometimes it gets tricky depending on, you might have a huge kind of bumper of, like, let's say kale, and you need a place to put the kale. You might have to just plant it where a cole crop had been the previous season. But I really do try to keep that separate so that it's just best for pest and disease prevention, is if you can kind of rotate it out as possible. So that's how I keep track of everything and where it's planted and how to kind of determine where things are planted. And I always do like to have a new one of these when I have a new season coming up. So I kind of try to look at what was planted the last season, write down what I want where. That way it makes it easier, so when you have your plants ready to go, it's not kind of a scramble of figuring out what plant is going to go in what bed. And I think that is about it. Thank you. Bye-bye.